Welcome to Galactic Atlas lore. If you enjoy these tales, please like and subscribe. If you have any recommendations you would like me to explore, please leave a comment. Let's begin. Part of the Galaxy. The History of Coruscant. Chapter 1. The Cradle of Galactic Civilization. All things begin somewhere. For the galaxy, that somewhere was Coruscant. Before the galaxy knew hyperspace lanes, before starships sliced between stars, before the First Republic Charter was etched into history, there was Coruscant. A world that burned bright with ambition, intellect and industry, long before any other dared to dream as loudly. It is no exaggeration to say Coruscant is the cradle of galactic civilization, not just because of its central location, but because its story is the story of galactic power, of rise and ruin, of order and chaos. The focus of the galaxy. Situated at galactic coordinates 0000, Coruscant occupies the exact intersection of the 5 major hyperlanes, the Corellian Run, the Palermian trade route, the Hydean Way, the Corward Spur, and the Rima trade route. It is the true heart of the galaxy, not just in myth or politics, but in physics and fate. Though it's now known by many names, Imperial Center, the Ecumenopolis, the City of Spires, its oldest name, Coruscant, comes from a basic root meaning glittering, an apt term, for even from orbit, the world shines like a star. But before the lights, before the towers, before the thousands of levels were stacked into the clouds, Coruscant was something simpler. It was a world of plains and seas, of natural beauty long since buried under ferrocrete and durasteel. Archaeological records suggest human civilization first arose on Coruscant over 100,000 years before the rise of the Republic. That makes it one of the oldest known inhabited worlds in the galaxy. Here, ancient human tribes gathered, warred, and eventually unified under a planetary government, the Taung and the Zel. The Taung were warriors, fierce and proud, and ruled much of the early world from the shadows of fire-wreathed mountains. The Zel, in contrast, were builders and thinkers, and their culture eventually dominated the surface world. The two clashed for centuries, in a conflict remembered only in fragmented stone tablets and oral traditions. Ultimately, the Zel drove the Taung away. The Taung vanished into space, eventually becoming the Mandalorians, warlike descendants of a forgotten Coruscanti people. With the planet unified under Zel rule, civilization expanded rapidly. Skyscrapers rose. Energy towers lit the dark, the oceans were drained, the forests paved over, and city blocks grew layer by layer. By the time the Republic first took shape around 25,000 BBY, Coruscant had already become a world city, a single continuous metropolis that covered the planet's entire surface. And with this explosive development came power. Coruscant did not become the capital of the Republic by accident. Its central location made it ideal, but its political acumen, its wealth, and its advanced institutions made it inevitable. The early Republic convened on Coruscant's surface in massive domed halls that would one day become the Galactic Senate. Speeches that shaped policy across systems were first uttered on this ancient world. It was here that the Republic's earliest ideals were formed: unity, democracy, shared progress, noble dreams that would be tested, and tested often. Technologically, Coruscant led the way in nearly every field. Shipbuilding, droid engineering, hyperspace communications, cloning theory, all had roots in the think tanks, research spires, and elite universities scattered across the upper levels. The city's wealth created a kind of intellectual gravity, pulling the best minds from across the core worlds and beyond. As new member systems joined the Republic, they modeled their cities on Coruscant, mimicked its law codes, even adopted its fashion. To many, Coruscant was not just a planet, it was civilization itself. But not all was utopian. Even in its earliest recorded history, Coruscant was a world of divisions between light and dark, rich and poor, truth and control. As buildings reached higher, so too did the shadows grow longer. The planet's surface, once home to thriving communities, was now buried under hundreds of levels of city infrastructure, the Underworld, what locals sometimes called the Dark Levels. Formed naturally as each new generation built on top of the last, over time, daylight ceased to exist in those depths. Street lamps and neon signs became the only sky. While the Senate and the elite classes debated policy in pristine towers above the clouds, billions toiled in the layers below, some never seeing the surface sky. Down there, the laws of the Republic became less relevant. Instead, organized crime, gang control, and raw survival dictated life. The irony was never lost. On the same planet where the greatest ideals of unity were spoken aloud, millions lived in fear and silence. And yet, Coruscant endured, because even in its contradictions, it represented something rare: permanence. Through wars, through regime changes, through betrayals and uprisings, Coruscant remained, always adapting, always rebuilding. As the Republic expanded and eventually militarized, Coruscant became a hub not only of politics and science, but of control. The Jedi Order, which had begun as scattered enclaves across the galaxy, eventually centered itself on Coruscant, establishing the Jedi Temple on the planet's surface, atop one of the world's oldest Force nexuses. From there, the Jedi served as peacekeepers for the entire Republic, lending Coruscant even more spiritual and diplomatic gravity. In many ways, Coruscant became the place where the will of the galaxy was decided. And that weight, that influence, would only increase as the centuries wore on. Civilizations would rise and fall around it, empires would claim it, rebels would try to liberate it. But the world at the center of all things would remain. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore that long and storied journey, from the golden days of the Galactic Republic to the rise of Palpatine's empire, from Jedi dominance to Sith conspiracy, from battles waged in orbit to silent revolutions fought in alleys deep underground. Coruscant is not just a planet, it is the beating heart of the galaxy. And its story is the story of us all. Chapter 2: The Republic's Foundation. Power did not come to Coruscant, it was born there. The foundation of the Galactic Republic marked the beginning of a new age not only for Coruscant, but for the entire known galaxy. In the midst of expanding star lanes and the dawn of reliable hyperspace travel, the disparate worlds of the core systems faced a choice: remain isolated, each with its own laws and ambitions, or unite beneath a common banner of governance, law, and shared progress. The answer came in the form of the Republic, and its capital, naturally, inevitably, was Coruscant. By the time of the Republic's formation, roughly 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Coruscant had already risen as a cultural and technological powerhouse. The Zell government had long since given way to a planetary council composed of representatives from different megacity sectors, and later representatives of different planetary regions. This early form of democratic representation laid the blueprint for what would eventually become the Galactic Senate. Coruscant's position at the junction of major hyperspace routes was no accident. The hyperlanes had been painstakingly mapped by explorers, both Force central and otherwise, often at great cost. Coruscant's centrality was both spatial and symbolic. It became the perfect neutral ground for ancient human colonies and other early starfaring species to meet, discuss trade, law, and cooperation. As the idea of a galaxy-spanning republic took shape, Coruscant rose to match it. Grand legislative domes were constructed, infrastructure scaled to accommodate envoys, ambassadors, and eventually entire species delegations. The newly formed republic was not merely a political body, it was an idea. It promised representation, peace, opportunity. and Coruscant, already so advanced in energy production, agriculture, what remained of it, and social administration, became the ideal seat for that promise. In the upper levels of the Senate district, soaring towers of glass and chrome housed embassies for thousands of worlds. Entire species built microbiomes within Coruscanti architecture to better acclimate their delegations. Every street in the political districts was multilingual. Droid translators and cultural liaisons became standard. The Senate Hall, perhaps Coruscant's most iconic structure aside from the Jedi Temple, was constructed in vast concentric circles. Its levitating repulsor pods allowed representatives to float into speaking range, symbolizing both equality and structure. From here, law was made, treaties were signed, wars were declared. The fate of billions could be shifted with a single vote, and it was on this floor that the greatest orators in galactic history made their names. Finis Valorum, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and, later, Sheev Palpatine himself. But while the Senate presided over the Republic, it was the Jedi Order that maintained its peace. As early as 24,500 BBY, the Jedi began to consolidate their ranks and move their primary temple to Coruscant. It was both a gesture and a safeguard. By positioning themselves so close to galactic politics, they could react swiftly to instability and influence the direction of peacekeeping efforts. The Jedi Temple stood as a towering spire, its 5 central pylons reaching upward like outstretched hands. At its heart was the Hall of Knowledge, a vast library containing some of the oldest archives in the galaxy. Jedi from across the stars came to train on Coruscant. Padawans were initiated, masters were made. The temple's presence lent the Republic not just strength, but legitimacy. Many worlds only joined the Republic because they believed in the Jedi's moral authority. And yet, as Coruscant's status as a galactic capital solidified, so too did its inequalities. The rapid expansion of the city world, necessary to accommodate the growing Republic bureaucracy, left many of its original sectors buried under newer construction. The Underworld deepened, levels built over levels, created a physical class system. Those with access to the sun and sky held power and privilege. Those forced to live in perpetual darkness, the poor, the criminal, the forgotten, were left behind. Coruscant's core world's aristocracy, sometimes referred to as the Sky Families, lived in penthouses that floated above the weather layer. These were the old money elite, descendants of founding families who controlled banking, energy, and transport conglomerates. Meanwhile, beneath them, the mid-levels became dense with commercial spires, residential stacks, and bureaucratic facilities where millions of white-collar workers lived and died without ever seeing a tree. And below that, the depths, level 1313 and beyond, where law dissolved and syndicates ruled. Despite this imbalance, Coruscant's influence remained unmatched. The Great Hyperspace War, 5000 BBY, the Sith Wars, the formation of the Trade Federation, and the Mandalorian incursions all pivoted around Coruscant's strategic role. When Republic fleets launched, they launched from Coruscant's orbital yards. When peace was negotiated, it was signed in the Chancellor's office. The Chancellor of the Republic, an office based on early Coruscanti political customs, rotated by term. While originally a ceremonial leader, over the centuries, the Chancellor's powers expanded, especially during periods of war or crisis. Some Chancellors, like Tarsus Valorum, were known for diplomatic brilliance, others were mere figureheads, and some, like Palpatine, would forever redefine the office into something far darker. It is important to understand that Coruscant's importance was not merely symbolic. Control of Coruscant often was control of the Republic. It housed the Senate, the Jedi Council, the Supreme Courts, the Republic Navy's Central Command, and the Bureau of Ships and Services. More than that, it housed the most advanced surveillance systems, the largest database network outside the Jedi archives, and the most powerful holonet transmitters in the core. To live on Coruscant during the Republic's golden age was to live in the center of everything. You were never far from a decision that might shake a star system, You could walk past senators, Jedi, business magnates, and beggars in a single hour. You could get lost in a crowd of 20 million and still feel like the galaxy watched your every move. And as the Republic grew, so too did the tension between its ideals and its realities. Trade disputes, corruption, separatist movements, these pressures would test the Republic's ability to remain unified, and Coruscant, as its beating heart, would be the place where those tensions erupted. As we move forward into the next chapter, we'll explore how the Jedi Order shaped Coruscant's political and spiritual identity, and how their presence, once considered incorruptible, became the first domino in a long and tragic fall. Chapter 3. Jedi and the Temple World. To understand Coruscant, one must understand the Jedi. Not just as warriors or monks, but as architects of the very order that once kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart. The Jedi Order and Coruscant are inseparable. While the Jedi had existed long before they came to reside on the city planet, dating back some 25,000 years to the days of Titan in the deep core, their eventual decision to establish their central temple on Coruscant permanently entwined their fate with that of the Republic. When the Republic was still young, the Jedi functioned primarily as itinerant peacekeepers, mediating conflicts and protecting innocent lives across fledgling colonies. But as the galaxy expanded and new sectors were incorporated into the growing Republic, a more centralized Jedi presence was required. Thus, the Order returned to Coruscant, building a structure atop a place where the Force flowed strongly, a site older than civilization itself. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant was more than just a religious or training complex. It was a monument to ancient philosophy, a fortress of knowledge, and a beacon of calm in a galaxy increasingly beset by chaos. It towered over the skyline of the temple precinct, its 5 central spires reaching high above even the tallest commercial skyscrapers. The tallest of these spires, the Tranquility Spire, housed the Jedi Council, 12 wise masters who debated galactic affairs, maintained the Jedi Code, and guided the path of every Jedi in the Order. At the heart of the temple lay the Jedi Archives, an immense subterranean vault of galactic history, philosophy, and metaphysical theory. No library in the Republic, not even the Senate's Central Records Complex, held as much collective wisdom. Jedi Masters like Jocasta Nu curated it with fanatical precision, and Padawans often spent entire years immersed in study before ever igniting a lightsaber in the field. To the people of Coruscant, the Jedi were an enigma, seen often but rarely understood. They walked among the citizens in their simple robes, offering counsel or investigating disturbances, yet they were not of the city. They lived apart from wealth and politics, residing in sparse chambers, meditating for hours, training tirelessly in both combat and serenity. And despite their constant presence, most citizens knew only rumors and holodramas of the Jedi's true role. Younglings, 4 sensitive children from across the galaxy, were brought to the temple to be trained in the Jedi arts. Some were Coruscanti by birth, but most had been discovered on distant worlds, offered a life of service, discipline, and sacrifice. These children, raised communally in clans, were guided by experienced Jedi instructors, eventually selected by individual knights as Padawans. The public mostly accepted this without question. After all, the Jedi were guardians of peace and justice. But among the lower levels, among the cynical and the criminal, rumors festered. That the Jedi took children without true consent, that they trained for war, not peace, that they served the Senate too loyally and would turn a blind eye to injustice if it came from the upper levels. There was some truth in these fears. As the Republic grew bloated with bureaucracy, corruption found its way even into the highest offices. Trade disputes escalated into planetary blockades. War profiteering began to influence Senate votes. The Jedi, once proud of their neutrality, found themselves increasingly entangled in statecraft. They were called upon to resolve political crises, enforce Republic decrees, and eventually to command troops. This transformation reached a peak during the Clone Wars. With the outbreak of galactic civil war following the Separatist crisis, the Jedi assumed positions as generals in the Grand Army of the Republic, a military force made entirely of clone soldiers grown on Kamino. It was a move many Jedi questioned, including masters like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Luminara Unduli, and the ever-controversial Quinlan Vos. Some believed it necessary, others saw it as the first step toward the Jedi becoming warriors instead of peacekeepers. From their temple on Coruscant, Jedi coordinated entire campaigns, working closely with Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who by then had assumed emergency powers. The temple itself became militarized in subtle ways. Its archives used for war intelligence, its hangars launching fighters to battlefronts across the galaxy. And as Jedi died by the thousands on distant worlds, those who remained carried the weight of not only their own losses, but the Republic's growing reliance on their strength. It is difficult to overstate how much the temple came to symbolize during the Clone Wars. For supporters of the Republic, it was a fortress of light. For separatists, it was the face of tyranny in robes. For those in the shadows, Sith lords, corrupt senators, and power-hungry bureaucrats, it was a threat to be eliminated. And eliminate it they did. In 19 BBY, at the climax of the Clone Wars, Chancellor Palpatine, secretly Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord, executed a coup that would change Coruscant forever. Declaring the Jedi traitors, he activated Order 66, a hidden protocol within the clones' programming that compelled them to turn on their Jedi commanders. Across the galaxy, Jedi fell. On Coruscant, clone forces marched on the temple itself, slaughtering its inhabitants in what became known as the Jedi Purge. The temple, once a monument to peace, was bathed in fire and silence. In the aftermath, the temple was not destroyed. Instead, Palpatine repurposed it, turning it into the Imperial Palace, his seat of power as Emperor. Statues of Jedi were torn down, archives were sealed. Force-sensitive relics were confiscated or destroyed. What was once the spiritual center of the Republic became the very heart of the Empire's cruelty. Some Jedi survived. They fled into exile, hid in the darkest corners of the Outer Rim, or became hermits on forgotten worlds. But the temple on Coruscant stood empty, a ghost of what it had been. And so Coruscant, the city of light, bore witness to a great darkness. It is a reminder that even those who walk in the light may be led into shadow, not with malice but with misjudged loyalty. The Jedi fell not because they were weak, but because their closeness to power blinded them to the truth. As we move forward, we will explore the rise of the Empire itself and how Coruscant, once the beacon of galactic unity, became the stage upon which authoritarianism performed its most brutal theater. Chapter 4. War and Rebellion, Coruscant under siege. A city built on ideals is most vulnerable when those ideals are betrayed. The fall of the Jedi Temple did not mark the end of Coruscant's transformation. In truth, it was only the beginning. The great ecumenopolis, which had for millennia stood as the shining heart of democracy and peace, now pulsed with a colder energy. Overnight, the Galactic Republic was restructured into the Galactic Empire, where there had once been applause in the Senate Rotunda for the ideals of unity and freedom. Now there was silence, interrupted only by the Emperor's voice, thunderous and final. Palpatine's reign began with efficiency. Order 66 had eliminated nearly all Jedi resistance. The temple was seized and fortified. Holo networks across the galaxy were altered to proclaim the Jedi as traitors, saboteurs of peace who had tried to assassinate the Chancellor, and the people believed it. Or rather, they accepted it. After years of war, after countless battles, many citizens welcomed the idea of strong leadership, even if it came draped in shadow. The Imperial Palace, converted from the Jedi Temple, loomed over the city like a scar. Its spires, once sacred, were now patrolled by black-armored shock troops. The Senate remained, for a time, but its power waned with every passing cycle. Senators who questioned the Emperor were removed quietly. Others resigned. In their place came loyalists, corporate puppets, and regional governors who owed their lives to Palpatine's rise. and the lower levels' change was more immediate. The already stark divide between the surface elite and the sub-city masses became chasmic. The Empire redirected city resources toward military production, conscription and surveillance. The once vast social services of the Republic, housing assistance, refugee processing, healthcare, all were stripped or dismantled. In their place came recruitment centers, propaganda outposts, and the ever-present hum of stormtrooper patrols. For many Coruscanti citizens, life carried on. The mid-level workers continued their commutes, watched their holodramas, paid their taxes. But beneath the illusion of stability, the city choked. Dissidents vanished, surveillance droids became common in residential blocks, and fear, quiet, systemic fear, settled like dust across every district. Coruscant was no longer the seat of democracy, it had become the symbol of control. But where there is oppression, resistance finds its voice. The earliest whispers of rebellion on Coruscant began in the shadows. Disgraced senators like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, still operating within the legal bounds of the Senate, met in secret. Using encrypted communications and old Jedi frequencies, they laid the groundwork for what would become the Rebel Alliance. These meetings, often held within forgotten temples or underground tunnels predating the Republic itself, were dangerous. The Emperor's intelligence network, the ISB, was vast and merciless. At the same time, former Jedi survivors like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka Tano worked quietly to protect refugees and smuggle Force-sensitive children off-world. Though Coruscant had become a hostile environment, its labyrinthine depths allowed such secrets to survive. For a time. One of the most daring acts of resistance during this period came not from the surface, but from Level 1313, a notorious district deep within the city's underworld. Long ignored by the upper levels, 1313 became a breeding ground for anti-Imperial sentiment. There, smugglers, slicers, and former Clone Wars veterans banded together, forming a cell called the Crimson Veil. Their sabotage of an Imperial troop transport, broadcast across hacked holoc channels, sparked renewed courage across the lower sectors. Of course, the Empire responded. Purge troopers and Sith Inquisitors were dispatched to root out surviving Jedi and dissenters. Entire blocks of Level 13 were razed. The holonet was restricted. Travel between levels became heavily monitored. The palace's skyline was ringed with orbital defense platforms. Coruscant, once open to the stars, now resembled a fortress. But the fire could not be extinguished. Even from the depths, the people remembered what Coruscant had once been. A place of light, a place of truth. And eventually, the Empire fell. Following the Battle of Endor, the news of Emperor Palpatine's death spread slowly. Coruscant, isolated by design, heard the news weeks later. But when it came like a flood. Riots broke out across the city. Stormtroopers clashed with protesters. Rebel light militias rose from hiding. And finally, the Senate, long defunct, was stormed by its own people. The Imperial remnant tried to hold the city, but it was already lost. When the new Republic arrived, they found a battered, burning Coruscant. Streets still smoldered, citizens hungry and afraid, buildings bombed out, covered in the slogans of revolution. Down with the dark, return to the light, this is our city. Coruscant was free again, but it was changed. Gone was the gleaming optimism of the old Republic. In its place stood a cautious hope, hard-earned, battered by war. The people had not forgotten how easily peace could slip into tyranny. The Senate was re-established, but this time the capital would rotate between core worlds, no longer centralized, no longer vulnerable. Coruscant remained important, but no longer supreme. Still, many remained, some to rebuild, others to remember. And as the rubble was cleared, as old murals were uncovered, as children ran through the ruins of once feared checkpoints, a new chapter began. The story of Coruscant would go on, not because it was untouched by history, but because it had survived it. Chapter 5. Imperial rule. The iron fist in the core. On Coruscant, the Empire didn't just win, it rewrote the sky. With the Jedi gone, the Senate hollowed, and war weariness blanketing the galaxy, Emperor Palpatine seized the moment. The transformation of Coruscant from the heart of democracy to the throne of tyranny was neither subtle nor slow. It was immediate, architectural, and all-consuming. The city-planet that once held temples of peace, towers of discourse, and archives of justice became something else entirely. A monolithic seat of fear. The galaxy saw Coruscant as the symbol of Imperial strength, and those who lived on it felt that strength in every aspect of their lives. The Jedi Temple, once the beacon of hope atop one of Coruscant's highest peaks, was refitted into the Imperial Palace. Its sacred towers were restructured with defensive turrets, its tranquil halls gutted and replaced with audience chambers, prisons, and interrogation chambers. The ancient Jedi archives were sealed. Some believe they were quietly dismantled. Others claim they still exist, hidden behind layers of Sith alchemy and coded vaults. The palace was the Emperor's preferred seat of power, and from its highest room, Palpatine watched the city below, always cloaked in shadow. Unlike chancellors before him, who ruled through policy and consensus, Palpatine ruled through information and terror. His grasp of the Force and mastery of deception made him a godlike figure, both invisible and omnipresent. Surrounding the palace was a constant procession of armed convoys, dignitaries from loyal worlds and robed bureaucrats. Few ever saw the Emperor in person. Fewer still lived after displeasing him. The Imperial court was a nest of spies and secrets, where favor could be bought for a price, and power was temporary by design. The Empire's core bureaucracy swelled on Coruscant. Agencies like Compannor, commissioned for the preservation of the New Order, the Imperial Security Bureau, and the Imperial Diplomatic Corps dominated entire districts. The Grand Vizier Maz Ameda managed the day-to-day affairs, a chilling figure who rarely blinked and never disobeyed. The Senate did persist, but only in form. It remained a symbolic body, allowed to argue and protest, provided they did not act. Every decision ultimately funneled through the Emperor or his regional governors, known as Moffs. Coruscant's Senate chambers, once electric with debate, grew colder. Many senators chose silence. Others became collaborators. A few, like Bail Organa, stayed to fight from within. Militarily, Coruscant became the most fortified non-naval planet in the galaxy. Its orbital defense platforms were upgraded with ion cannons, planetary shields, and tractor beam clusters. The Imperial Navy stationed several star destroyers above the city at all times. On the ground, Attistes patrolled main avenues, stormtroopers replaced municipal police, surveillance droids buzzed through the air. Checkpoints turned neighborhoods into garrisons. The clone troopers of the Republic, once regarded as heroes, were gradually phased out, replaced by conscripted stormtroopers trained on distant Imperial academies. Their armor was whiter, their aim less precise, and their orders absolute. They were not heroes. They were enforcers. To live on Coruscant during the height of Imperial rule was to live in a place where the past was forbidden. Schools no longer taught of the Jedi. The old Republic was described as weak, bloated, and corrupt. The Emperor was not called Palpatine publicly, only the Emperor. Statues were erected in his image. Propaganda was broadcast hourly. Entire news networks were scripted in advance. Art was censored. Alien species were displaced, forced into segregated districts, or shipped off-world under the pretense of reallocation. Human-centric ideology, part of Palpatine's hidden Sith doctrine, took hold in quiet, insidious ways. Many humans embraced it. Many others disappeared for speaking against it. Yet the Underworld endured. Beneath the surface, far beneath the shining black towers and military parade grounds, the lower levels of Coruscant remained wild, chaotic, and violent. Imperial patrols reached some parts, but not all. Crime syndicates like Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate and others grew more daring, using the chaos to cement control. Slavery, spice trafficking, arms dealing all found sanctuary in the city's shadow. The Empire turned a blind eye when it was convenient, especially when the credits flowed upward. Some officers were corrupt, others were simply afraid. Level 13 became a notorious hive of sedition, its name spoken only in hushed tones on the surface. Here, among the scrap heaps and alleys, the rebellion's roots began to stir. Small rebel cells formed across Coruscant, including in the mid-levels. Where ordinary citizens still remembered the Republic's early promises, hollow graffiti began to appear. Hope lives, down with the throne. One mural, painted across the face of a fallen stormtrooper barracks, simply read, "This is not our city." The Empire responded with brutality. Raids became common, curfews were enforced, holofeeds were monitored by algorithmic sensors that could detect forbidden phrases. Still, resistance persisted, silent, clever, and growing. Behind the scenes, the Emperor conducted his darkest experiments from Coruscant. It is believed that several Sith laboratories existed within the palace, hidden beneath the ruins of the Jedi Temple. Some spoke of a secret observatory, others whispered of cloning chambers, of ancient Sith relics unearthed from Coruscant's crust and studied by Imperial cultists. Whether myth or truth, those places were never found. If they existed, they were buried along with the Emperor's secrets. Coruscant was Palpatine's crown. Not Naboo, not Mustafar, not Exegol. It was the city that proved his doctrine, that hope could be strangled, that truth could be rewritten, and that fear, properly shaped, could wear the face of order. But even here, in the Emperor's stronghold, the spark survived. When the Rebel Alliance scored victory at Endor and the second Death Star fell, the illusion began to crumble. Though Coruscant remained under Imperial control in the immediate aftermath, the people knew. Word spread, faster than even Palpatine's censorship could smother. The Emperor was dead. The tide had turned. Within days, riots broke out. Imperial garrisons were overrun. Banners were torn down. Citizens dragged statues into the streets. Thousands died in the chaos. But the message was clear. Coruscant would no longer be ruled by fear. The Empire had fallen, and the city at the heart of the galaxy, wounded, broken but unbowed, prepared to be reborn. Chapter 6. Liberation and the New Republic. Picking up the pieces. Coruscant survived the Empire, but survival is not the same as healing. The fall of the Empire was not a singular moment, but a series of cascading collapses across a galaxy in upheaval. The Battle of Endor was the fulcrum, the explosion of the second Death Star, the death of Emperor Palpatine, and the defeat of the Imperial fleet sent shockwaves across every star system. But nowhere was the effect more profound and more chaotic than on Coruscant. For over 2 decades, Coruscant had lived under Imperial doctrine. Its people had learned to whisper, to obey, to look away. But beneath the layers of propaganda and precision, resentment had fermented. Fear had never evolved into love. And so when the iron grip faltered, the city rose in fury. Riots swept through the lower levels first. Stormtrooper barracks were burned. Holoscreens displaying Imperial slogans were smashed. People took to the streets chanting forbidden names: Organa, Skywalker, Jedi. The statue of Palpatine in Unity Plaza, once 40 meters high, was toppled by a crowd of thousands, crashing through the stairs of the Senate approach like a symbol of collective catharsis. But rebellion does not equate to immediate freedom. While the Empire was in disarray, it was not truly gone. Moffs, warlords, and rogue fleets still held power across the stars, and Coruscant's Imperial remnant fought to maintain control. The transition was bloody. Urban warfare erupted across several districts. The civilian death toll climbed. It was not until the New Republic, newly formed and barely organized, landed forces on Coruscant that true liberation began. The New Republic's initial occupation was cautious. They knew Coruscant's infrastructure was still deeply tied to Imperial systems, communications, defense networks, planetary shields. Entire districts were wired with traps and surveillance programs. Dozens of military outposts had to be disabled, often manually. Even stormtroopers without central command posed a danger. Some surrendered, some refused. Many disappeared into the lower levels, becoming mercenaries or assassins for hire in a fractured underworld. And yet, amid the smoke and wreckage, hope took shape. The old Senate building, damaged during the final days of the riots, was partially restored. While the New Republic intended to rotate its capital between worlds like Chandrila, Mon Cala, and Hosnian Prime, Coruscant would always be symbolic. It remained a center for galactic communication, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The greatest challenge, however, was the soul of the planet. The people of Coruscant had suffered for too long. Generations had grown up under dictatorship. Restoring institutions wasn't enough. The culture itself had to change. The New Republic instituted widespread reforms. Imperial indoctrination programs in schools were dismantled. HoloNet regulations were relaxed. New elections were held for local district governance, some of the first free votes in decades. Still, the scars ran deep. Alien communities, once displaced or segregated by the Empire, began returning to their ancestral neighborhoods, reclaiming long-abandoned buildings. Mon Calamari diplomats helped rebuild civic centers. Twi'lek architects designed new community spaces with light and vertical gardens. Survivors of the rebellion, including former senators and freedom fighters, returned to help oversee the reformation of civil government. And yet not everyone embraced this new order. Pockets of Imperial loyalty persisted. Some citizens, especially among the upper echelons who had benefited from the Empire's order and economy, resisted the changes. They viewed the New Republic as chaotic, too lenient, or naive. Seditious propaganda circulated in hidden data nodes. Subterranean enclaves of ex-Imperial officers plotted in secret, and from the far edges of the galaxy, the mysterious First Order began to stir. Despite this, Coruscant began to breathe again. Parks were replanted where war machines had once parked. Museums reopened, displaying artwork and cultural pieces hidden during the Empire's censorship. Jedi artifacts, once stolen or buried, were quietly returned to public archives. Some even studied in secret by Force-sensitive scholars, hoping to rebuild what was lost. Young people raised in silence began to speak. Songs returned to the streets. Political satire blossomed. Independent holocasts emerged, broadcasting voices from levels never heard before. For the first time in a generation, Coruscant felt alive, not just in motion, but in spirit. The question of whether to make Coruscant the permanent capital again sparked fierce debate within the New Republic. Its symbolic weight was undeniable, but many feared concentrating power in one place again, especially a world so bruised by dictatorship. The final decision placed the official capital on Chandrila and later Hosnian Prime, though Coruscant remained a central hub for bureaucracy, the Jedi initiative, and diplomatic affairs. Over the next years, the city was slowly rewoven, district by district, level by level. Droid maintenance teams, now operated by independent guilds, cleaned the lower levels and reconnected forgotten transit corridors. New universities opened, focused on historical truth and galactic ethics. The Jedi Temple ruins, still standing despite years of desecration, were declared a protected historical site. Some whispered it would one day be rebuilt. Through it all, Coruscant endured. Its skyline, once rigid and authoritarian, now glittered with different colors, some sanctioned, some rebellious. Its levels hummed with new languages, new hopes. The old foundations remained, but the people had reshaped the city. Because that is Coruscant's legacy, not just survival, but transformation. It had been the capital of an ideal, then the throne of a tyrant, then the site of revolution, and now, slowly, the birthplace of something new. And yet, beneath its towers and walkways, its holosigns and starports, something older remains, etched into its deepest layers. The truth of Coruscant, the truth of the galaxy. That power rises, that it falls, and that somewhere in the center of it all, Coruscant watches. Chapter 7. Urban Life and Culture. What it means to live on Coruscant. Living on Coruscant means living in the galaxy's most densely populated paradox, both the throne of civilization and the shadows beneath it. There is no planet in the galaxy quite like Coruscant. To step foot on its surface, if one can even find a spot where nature still dares to peek through, is to stand on the bones of 10,000 generations. Every meter of ferrocrete, every lighted tower, every transit beam and airlift tunnel tells a story of civilization piled atop itself, and yet, for the billions who call Coruscant home, it is simply that. Home, not a museum or myth, a place to work, to eat, to grow old, to laugh in crowded squares, to raise children under neon skies. At its peak, Coruscant held over 1 trillion inhabitants, not including transient droids, visitors, and undocumented residents of the Undercity. That's more life than any other known world, from the upper spires that reach above the weather layer to the deepest sublevels where sunlight is a rumor. The layers of Coruscant aren't just vertical, they're cultural. To live in the upper levels is to live in luxury. Here, the skyline is dominated by corporate towers, diplomatic embassies, and penthouses with transparent walls and personal landing pads. The air is cleaner, filtered through climate systems unavailable in lower sectors. Traffic lanes are precise, managed by aerial droid hubs that direct speeder flow like arteries feeding a living, humming machine. Dining in the upper levels is a cultural experience. Corellian wine lounges, Mon Calamari Tide fusion cuisine, and holographic entertainment so real you feel it in your bones. This is where the elite dwell. Former senators, corporate magnates, cultural icons, and occasionally those hiding secrets too valuable to live anywhere else. But as you descend, the galaxy begins to change. Mid-level Coruscant is where the bulk of the population resides. It is the bureaucratic heart of the world. Millions work in government buildings, transport hubs, medical sectors, and commercial towers. Housing is stacked in modules, often with shared oxygen filtration, communal dining squares, and neighborhood hangars. Life here is fast, densely packed, but largely stable. You might walk past 10 species on your way to work. You'll find 1,000 holobooths broadcasting news, debate, and fiction. You'll eat in a street cafe next to a Rhodian bartering over ship parts. And at night, you might climb to a balcony and stare upward. Not to the stars, but to another tower, another world looming above your own. Then the depths. The underworld of Coruscant, starting around level 13 and descending for kilometers, is a galaxy of its own. Little sunlight reaches here, and what does is filtered through the scars of old infrastructure. Entire blocks are built atop the ruins of pre-Republic architecture. Some levels are abandoned, haunted by malfunctioning droids and failed genetic experiments. Others are thriving in their own way. Markets run by gangs, cantinas guarded by blaster-proof bouncers, tech shrines lit by stolen plasma coils. It's dangerous, yes, but for many, it's also home. Coruscant depth culture is built on resilience. Down here, stories travel faster than light. Street preachers speak of Jedi who still walk the dark, of old Sith ghosts whispering through air vents, of children born with power in their blood. And music, strange, layered, alien music, echoes from the pipes. Life below may be hard, but it is not lifeless. Diversity is one of Coruscant's defining features. You will hear thousands of dialects on any given walk. The architecture shifts from sector to sector. Togratan-style stonework beside Duros crystal gardens, Trandoshan dens next to core world banks. While the Empire's human-centric policies once tried to strip Coruscant of its multicultural identity, the The people rebuilt it with renewed pride. Mosaics of liberation now coat the walls where propaganda once flickered. Ancient temples once suppressed are being excavated, repurposed into places of healing, art, and open discourse. Transit on Coruscant is a miracle of coordination. Sky trains on magnetic rails crisscross the upper and mid-levels, some traveling hundreds of kilometers without stopping. Air taxis, known locally as gliders, weave between towers, their routes dictated by constantly shifting air traffic protocols. For those in the lower levels, footpaths and old tunnels are common, often lit by bioluminescent fungi or jury-rigged lamp poles. Some levels operate on barter systems, others accept only encrypted credits or favor-based economies. It's chaotic, it's unpredictable, it's alive. What about crime? It's ever-present, but so is enforcement. The Coruscant Security Force, CSF, separate from the military, manages most day-to-day policing. Droids supplement their numbers, especially in districts too dangerous for organics. Despite best efforts, criminal syndicates remain powerful, especially in the Undercity. Names like Black Sun, the Crime Aura Syndicate, and remnants of Crimson Dawn are still whispered with fear. Some districts are autonomous entirely, operated by mercenary guilds or criminal councils who handle law enforcement in their own fashion. Religion on Coruscant is as diverse as its people. While the Jedi once embodied spiritual authority, their absence left a vacuum. Now, shrines to the Force coexist with temples to the Scorekeeper, worship halls of the Toggerton Dreaming Path, Ithorian life chants, and even obscure philosophies from the unknown regions. Some citizens see Coruscant itself as divine, a world that never dies, that absorbs all things and still stands. Education, while once centralized under Imperial control, is now an open system. Dozens of universities compete for influence, some scientific, others political, still others dedicated to ethics, philosophy, or engineering. The University of Coruscant, rebuilt after the fall of the Empire, remains the most prestigious. But many children still grow up learning in communal pods, taught by family, droids, or local mentors. Living on Coruscant means never seeing true darkness, but also rarely seeing stars. The sky is a maze of lights, landing beams, shuttle flashes, and distant cruisers. Rain is artificial, weather patterns are engineered, but when it does fall, real rain, after a storm breaks through the upper layers, there is silence, a kind of shared pause. That is what it means to live on Coruscant. To feel history in the very metal beneath your feet. To live beside 1,000 strangers and still feel alone. To stare upward and know the city has no end. To be part of something immense, ancient, flawed, and enduring. To belong to the galaxy's greatest contradiction, a world of order and chaos, of dreams and ruin, of war and rebirth. And always movement, light, stories. Coruscant is not a place where you stop. It is a place where you become. Chapter 8. Politics and Power, the Senate, the Chancellor, and the Engines of Rule. Coruscant was not just the seat of power, it was power. To understand the galaxy, one must understand Coruscant's political heart, not just as a location, but as an ecosystem. The Senate chambers, the Chancellor's office, the bureaucratic towers surrounding the government district. Together, these weren't simply structures, they were the pulse of galactic civilization. Billions of beings, across thousands of star systems, woke each day, bound in some way to decisions made within a few square kilometers on Coruscant's uppermost spires. The Galactic Senate, as an institution, dates back to the earliest days of the Republic's founding, over 25 millennia before the Battle of Yavin. In its prime, it was the galaxy's largest political forum, composed of representatives from member worlds, sectors, and alliances. It was here, floating in repulsor lift pods that could rise and rotate to address the entire assembly, that planetary leaders gave voice to their people. Each senator represented not just their home world, but a philosophy. Some lobbied for free trade, others pushed for military expansion, some fought for sentient rights, others cloaked corruption in eloquence. The Senate Hall itself, an immense circular chamber with thousands of floating platforms, was a marvel of acoustics and design. Debates here could last days. Votes, when passed, could alter the course of galactic history. But behind the theatrics of legislation, real power often operated in quieter places. The Chancellor, elected by the Senate, was the Republic's executive authority. Though the position was originally one of coordination and diplomacy, wartime expansions of power reshaped it into something more akin to a head of state. Chancellors like Valorum attempted to hold on to democratic ideals, but it was Palpatine who forever changed the role. His manipulation of emergency powers during the Clone Wars set the stage for authoritarian control, and while the Empire dismantled the Senate entirely, its spectre lingered. When the New Republic rose from the ashes, it chose not to return to a Coruscant-based Senate permanently. The rotating capital system was born, a safeguard against centralization and tyranny. Yet even so, Coruscant remained the political lodestone. Many departments, embassies, and agencies stayed headquartered here. Most trade regulation and diplomatic proceedings passed through Coruscant's enormous civic archives and data nodes. The bureaucracy, often maligned, was Coruscant's true ruling class. Ministry towers stretched kilometers into the sky, each housing subdivisions of government, tax enforcement, labor rights, immigration oversight, trade route logistics, species protection laws, energy distribution, atmospheric regulation. Every aspect of life on a Republic world, from food tariffs to mining safety protocols, was processed in some fashion through these towers. Thousands of civil servants spent their lives inside them, never seeing a Senate floor, never meeting a Jedi or a senator, but quietly shaping the galaxy, one protocol at a time. These were the invisible architects of order. And with bureaucracy came intrigue. Lobbying on Coruscant was a science unto itself. Representatives from powerful corporations, planetary consortiums, and noble houses all maintained permanent offices in the government district. Some senators were honest. Many were not. Entire careers were made or destroyed based on which luxury restaurant a senator was spotted in, or which transport dock their shuttle used. Private clubs like the Golden Spire Lounge or the Moff's Balcony were rumored to be where true deals were struck, far from the cameras of the Senate floor. Security around the Senate complex was nearly impenetrable. CSF officers, private guards, and surveillance droids patrolled every access corridor. ID checkpoints, retina scans, even Force-sensitive profiling ensured no unauthorized individuals could enter. Still, assassinations had occurred, espionage was constant. Holonet leaks, intercepted communiques, and silent bribes were part of daily life. In this environment, idealism often withered, and yet idealists continued to rise. Political parties on Coruscant were numerous, though rarely formalized. The Core Alliance favored centralized economic policy and defense spending. The Rim delegation advocated for expansion and Rim-world representation. The Species Equality Bloc campaigned for the rights of non-humans and droid recognition. Though fierce debates raged, most senators shared one truth: no world mattered more to their ambitions than Coruscant. And this made the Chancellor's office, the literal highest room in the Senate Tower, the most sought-after seat in the galaxy. From here, chancellors gave speeches broadcast to trillions. They negotiated interplanetary treaties, summoned Jedi envoys, commanded fleets, and faced scandals. Some were scholars, some warriors, some were pawns. But all were shaped by Coruscant's gravity. Behind every chancellor was a web of aides, analysts, and senior advisors, the Office of Protocol, the Department of Galactic Unity, the Chief of Staff. Entire floors of the tower were devoted to maintaining the Chancellor's schedule, message, and security. While the title carried power, the Chancellor was never truly alone. Throughout its history, Coruscant's political heart has weathered coups, assassinations, regime changes, and revolutions. And yet, it remains. Because governance, flawed, fragile, and fervent, is intrinsic to the galactic spirit. Coruscant with all its corruption and grandeur, serves as the galaxy's eternal agora. But politics alone do not explain Coruscant's influence. Power flows in shadows too, in underworld dealings, corporate rivalries, ancient secrets, and force-laced whispers. And it is there, in the depths beneath law and order, that our next chapter leads. Chapter 9. Underworld and Shadows, Crime, Secrets, and the Forgotten Depths. Coruscant is a vertical world, but it's the shadows that shape it. The deeper you go, the older the truth becomes. If the Senate floor is where laws are written, the underworld is where they're broken, not in rebellion always, not even in anger, often simply for survival. For generations, Coruscant's gleaming towers and political splendor have cast a deep shadow, and within that shadow, an entire world has thrived. To most citizens of the upper levels, the underworld is an abstraction. They know it exists, they may even fear it, but few ever descend to see it. That's by design. Coruscant's lowest levels are literally and figuratively buried beneath the weight of centuries. Entire city blocks, once vibrant districts, were built over again and again as expansion outpaced preservation. The result is a kind of time capsule, a galaxy of darkness, secrets, and survival. The most infamous of these layers is Level 1313. Originally constructed as part of a mid-Republic industrial project, 1313 became a self-contained district beneath the eyes of law and order. For decades, it served as a manufacturing hub, housing workers and machinery in equal measure, but as demand shifted and expansion continued upward, 1313 was abandoned by the Republic. What followed was inevitable. Crime took root. Today, Level 1313 is a chaotic blend of old infrastructure and outlaw culture. Neon signs flicker through dense smog. Streets buzz with the sound of broken droids, wheeled transports, and the occasional blaster shot. Here, black market tech dealers, spice traffickers, arms merchants, and bounty hunters conduct business in shadow. Cantinas double as mercenary guild halls. Lower-tier med bays patch up wounds no one dares report. Some districts are ruled by gangs, others by warlords, some are simply lawless. Among the many syndicates that call the underworld home, Black Sun remains the most dominant. Originating during the Republic's later years, Black Sun survived the rise and fall of the Empire, adapting like a virus to every regime change. Their influence stretches across levels, involving slicer networks, assassination contracts, and even political manipulation on the surface. Then there are the Pikes, with their spice routes winding through Coruscant's underbelly. Crimson Dawn, rumored to have returned in recent decades, operates in cells so well concealed they seem like ghost stories. Other gangs, smaller, more violent, rise and fall with alarming speed. The Blue Blades, Tunnel Rats, and Glarehounds are just a few names etched into graffiti-lined walls. Law enforcement rarely ventures this deep. The Coruscant Security Force, CSF, overstretched and underfunded in the lower sectors, as unofficially declared parts of the Undercity beyond jurisdiction. Private security firms sometimes operate under contract, but more often than not, they cut deals to protect only certain clients, abandoning the public to criminal governance. And yet, the underworld isn't all darkness. It is also a place of community, of forgotten species and lost faiths, of storytellers and scavengers. Markets here offer foods not seen in the upper levels. Artists craft sculptures from ancient machinery. Street musicians play alien instruments no one on the surface can name. Entire micro-societies exist in the ruins. Reclusive There are levels where children have never seen the sky, where families have passed stories for generations, oral histories of the Jedi, of Sith ghosts, of Force nexuses pulsing beneath the crust. Some believe ancient relics still lie buried in the deepest tunnels. Jedi holocrons, Sith tomes, even pre-Republic tech lost to time. Archaeologists and historians have long speculated that Coruscant was once a world of oceans and plains covered in natural beauty before being consumed by cityscape. In some of the lowest levels, far beneath 1313, ancient structures still remain. Gel ruins, temples carved into stone before durasteel ever touched the sky. They are shrouded in danger, sealed by forgotten systems, protected by automated defense grids, but the brave and the foolish still seek them. Whispers speak of Level 0, a place beyond any known record where even the Jedi once feared to tread. Some say it's where the Force began to stir on Coruscant. Others say it's where the dark side sleeps, waiting. And beyond the myths, there are real forces at play. Intelligence agencies, Imperial, Republic, Private, have long used the lower levels for clandestine operations. Safe houses, black site labs, interrogation cells that never existed on record. Even today, operatives vanish into the depths on missions too sensitive to name. Some return, some do not. Technology behaves differently here. Old comm systems fume with frequencies no one understands. Elevators descend, then fail to return. Droids react to commands in forgotten dialects. There are corridors that loop back upon themselves, doors that should not open, voices on the old speaker lines. And then there are the people, those born here, raised in shadow, who never ask for the surface and never want it, who see Coruscant not as a planet of light, but as a cathedral of darkness and truth. Some worship forgotten gods, some worship nothing at all. But all know power comes from knowledge, and knowledge often hides far beneath. This is the real Coruscant, not the Senate floors, not the Chancellor's office, but the forgotten, the hidden, the parts too dangerous to be mapped, too ancient to be erased. The Underworld is the city's memory, not always accurate, not always kind, but real. And as long as Coruscant endures, the shadow will grow with the light. Because in a city that never sleeps, something must always dream. Chapter 10. The Force and the Temple. Jedi Legacy on Coruscant. Long before the towers rose, before the Senate's first vote, there was the Force, and those who heard its call came to Coruscant not for power, but for purpose. Of all the institutions to rise and fall upon the surface of Coruscant, none left a deeper spiritual scar than the Jedi Order. While the Senate governed the galaxy's politics, it was the Jedi who once guided its conscience. For millennia, their temple stood tall above the skyline, not just as a monument to peacekeeping, but as a physical embodiment of the balance they swore to uphold. The Jedi Temple was constructed over one of the strongest Force vergences on Coruscant, perhaps in the entire galaxy. This ancient nexus, said to predate even the earliest Republic, was a place where the veil between the physical and the mystical thinned. Here, the Force whispered more clearly, and so, here, the Jedi built. From the outside, the temple was a masterwork of spiritual architecture. Its 5 towering spires reached into the clouds, their design echoing both ancient symbology and celestial geometry. At night, the central tower, the Tranquility Spire, glowed faintly with embedded crystals tuned to the flow of the Force. From orbit, travelers said it looked like a flame flickering at the city's core. Within the temple, the Order trained thousands of younglings and Padawans. These were not children of wealth or legacy. They were chosen from across the galaxy, discovered at birth for their sensitivity to the Force. They were brought to Coruscant with consent, at least in most cases, and inducted into a life of study, discipline, and inner peace. The initiate halls housed younglings in clans, Bear, Dragon, Heliost, and more, where they learned the code, practiced meditation, and sparred in training arenas. Instructors guided them through lessons of history, galactic lore, and the philosophy of the light side. From there, promising students were chosen by Jedi Knights to become Padawans and begin field service, often in dangerous or politically fraught situations. The archives, overseen for decades by the meticulous Master Jocasta Nu, were among the greatest repositories of galactic knowledge ever assembled. Texts from millennia past, holocrons encoded by ancient masters, star charts from forgotten expeditions, it was all there. To a Jedi, knowledge was sacred, truth even more so. Yet the Jedi were not without contradiction. For all their wisdom and restraint, the Order was rigid. Emotion was feared, attachment discouraged, politics officially shunned, but unofficially influenced. Their proximity to the Senate made them vulnerable, and when the Clone Wars erupted, they made a choice that would haunt their legacy forever. They became generals. From the war chambers deep within the temple, Jedi coordinated battles across the stars. They wore armor. They commanded legions of clone troopers. They gave orders that led to victory and to death. And while many did so with hesitation, the fact remained: the Jedi, once protectors of peace, had become tools of war. When the war ended, it ended in fire. Order 66, a command hidden in the genetic code of every clone. A single signal, and the galaxy's guardians were turned upon by the soldiers they once led. On Coruscant, the temple was stormed. Clones advanced level by level, cutting down masters, Padawans, even younglings. The slaughter was swift, ruthless, calculated. The temple fell. The light dimmed. In the years that followed, the structure was not razed but repurposed. Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, converted it into the Imperial Palace. The spires remained, but the windows were darkened. The halls, once filled with meditation and study, echoed with cruelty and silence. Statues of Jedi Masters were destroyed or defaced. The central meditation chamber was replaced with a throne room, rumored to contain Sith artifacts drawn from the deepest levels below. But the Force cannot be erased, and the temple, even desecrated, still hummed with it. Whispers persisted throughout the dark years that Jedi relics had been hidden within the temple's secret vaults, that survivors of the Purge returned in disguise to recover holocrons, that a child once lit a lightsaber in a forgotten training room and the walls wept. Myths, perhaps, or the Force remembering itself. When the Empire fell, the New Republic faced a choice: what to do with the temple. For some, it was a symbol of hope, a site worth restoring. For others, it was a graveyard, better left untouched. Ultimately, the structure was decommissioned. Parts of it were preserved as historical monuments. Other sections were sealed. But among the ruins, a new wave of Force sensitives began to gather, not in robes, not as Jedi, but as seekers. Small enclaves returned to meditate in the shattered gardens. Pilgrims wandered the shadowed libraries. Hollow murals of Jedi history were uncovered and restored by artists with no official blessing, only reverence. And when Luke Skywalker, last of the old Jedi, first of the new, began to seek knowledge to rebuild the Order, Coruscant's temple was among the places he visited, quietly, without announcement, not to reclaim it, but to remember. Because the temple is not just stone, it is memory, it is pain, it is a promise. The Jedi may not return to Coruscant in full. Their new temples may rise on other worlds in forests and moons and oceans, but Coruscant will always be part of their lineage, the place where generations trained, where the code was tested, where the light once blazed high above the city before it was betrayed, and before, perhaps, it could rise again. Because the Force moves in cycles, and in Coruscant's heart, the Force still breathes. Chapter 11. Coruscant Today. Legacy, Mystery, and the Heart of the Galaxy. Coruscant does not end, it transforms, it endures, it remembers. In the present age, Coruscant remains a world of contrasts. Its towers still reaching toward the stars, its foundations buried in shadow, its soul pulsing with the echoes of every civilization that came before. The New Republic has risen, faltered, and shifted its capital to distant worlds. New threats have emerged: the First Order, hidden Sith remnants, dark science born in exile. And yet, Coruscant persists, as it always has. Though it is no longer the official political capital, Coruscant remains a hub of commerce, culture, and administration. Its hyperspace lanes still intersect with the major trade routes of the core. Its holonets continue to transmit to trillions. The University of Coruscant is a beacon of thought and discourse. The Judiciary Plaza, though stripped of its old grandeur, still serves as a court for interplanetary mediation, and the great Senate chamber stands silent, sometimes used, often symbolic, waiting for the galaxy to decide what it wants to become. The people of Coruscant today live in a state of constant negotiation with history. Every building bears witness. Every sector is a palimpsest of eras layered one atop the other. Republic, Empire, Rebellion, Republic again, and all the unnamed moments between. In this city, children are raised on stories of Jedi who fell, who returned, who may yet rise again. Teenagers dare each other to descend into ancient tunnels seeking lost relics. Tourists hover in air taxis outside the ruins of the temple, snapping holos beside what they call a monument and others still call sacred ground. The city's skyline remains ever shifting. Since the fall of the Empire, new towers have emerged, solar efficient, open to the sky, shaped with architecture from every world willing to contribute. Alien cultures, once marginalized, now leave visible marks. Gungan water gardens in Sector 7D, a Wookiee treetop school on repulsor lift stilts, Rhodian music echoing through the vertical arcades of Crystal Plaza. The city has become a mosaic, woven not by any central hand, but by the people themselves. Still, problems persist. Crime is endemic in the lower levels. Infrastructure is strained. Social inequality remains deeply entrenched. Despite New Republic efforts, millions live in neglected zones, their lives defined by resource scarcity, pollution, and ancient environmental damage left by careless regimes. The environmental remediation project of sub-level 2456, for instance, has been delayed for nearly a decade, blocked by funding disputes and corporate resistance. And yet, within these forgotten levels, life thrives in its own chaotic rhythm. Art, rebellion, religion, and resilience are stronger in the depths than on the surface. Here, the people do not wait for the Senate, they build their own world. Coruscant's mysteries remain too. Beneath the deepest tunnels, untouched force nexuses are said to persist. Rogue archaeologists, force cults, and even remnants of Imperial research teams still hunt for something below the first light, as some call it, a place where it is said the Force first touched the world. Fact or legend, no one truly knows. And what of the Jedi? Luke Skywalker's efforts to rebuild the Order were brief and tragic, but the idea did not die. On Coruscant, quiet groups gather, not orders, but communities. They meditate in abandoned shrines. They study what records remain. They listen. Some are sensitive to the Force, some are not. All believe in something larger. Perhaps that is Coruscant's final legacy, not its power or its politics, but its memory. It is the galaxy's mirror. Everything that has been has passed through its halls, every victory, every betrayal, every hope. To walk its streets is to walk through time. You may pass a Durasteel ramp built last week, only to descend a stairwell from the era of the High Republic. You may ride a tram beneath a spire that once hosted Jedi duels. You may look up and see stars, or lights pretending to be stars, and wonder how many lives ended just beyond their glow. And in that moment, Coruscant becomes not just a city, but the galaxy itself. Compressed into towers and tunnels, glimmer and grime, silence and song. Because Coruscant is more than a place, it is the story. A story still being written,